Welcome to Nature's Guardians. I'm Micah Siegel. Each week, I talk with people working to save and help animals around the world. They are nature's guardians, and you can become one too. Today, I'm talking with Bren Ram from Island Conservation. Welcome to the show, Bren.
Hey, Micah, great to be here.
Do you have a presentation for us?
I do.
Okay.
Go ahead and share my screen. So I work for Island Conservation. My name is Dr. Bren, and we are an organization that goes around the world making islands safe and restoring the ecosystems for all different kinds of animals. So the first thing to know is that islands are really, really special places. Animals that live on islands don't live anywhere else in the whole world. They evolved on these islands sort of on their own, and without a lot of interference from different places and different species from the mainland. And they also have really, really unique ecosystems near the shore. So they have like kelp forests and coral reefs and all sorts of really, really exciting things. Um, a huge percentage of the biodiversity of the whole world is from like they live on islands and they can be found nowhere else. But they're also facing like a lot of crises. The main two being failing ocean health. So the oceans are like really getting um, acidified and getting too warm, and they can't support the right amount of fish and the right amount of coral. And then they're also facing a lot of extinctions because animals on land are facing competition, all sorts of things like human intervention, habitat loss, and invasive species that come in and eat the eggs of the birds or eat turtle babies and stop them from being able to have their whole lives. But the coolest thing about island conservation is that we have stories of hope. So we have a very, very high success rate at doing this thing we call holistic restoration, which looks at all of the different trophic levels of an ecosystem and makes sure that all of the nutrients and all of the species that are supposed to be there are there, and that species that are interrupting those cycles are not there and not getting in the way. So the number one thing that makes us the most excited about this work is that a when an island is restored, when it's a safe place for different animals, seabirds come back. And these birds are important because they go out into the ocean and eat fish, and bring a lot of nutrients back. And then they poop on the island, and their guano has just tons and tons of nutrients in it. And that's like the main way that islands get nutrients onto the land. So we call them connector species because they take things from ocean ecosystems and bring them onto the land. So those critical nutrients make the soil really, really healthy so different plants can grow. And when it rains, those nutrients wash off into the nearshore ecosystems as well. So with the healthy soil, plants can grow. We also see different species of invasive animals that eat a lot of the vegetation. So they, stop it from being able to grow. So when those are gone, we see much healthier vegetation. And then when the nutrients wash off into the surrounding ocean, you actually see 50% more fish near islands that have been restored compared to islands that have not been restored. The same thing goes for coral. They recover from bleaching, like coral bleaching, 4 times faster than they would if there wasn't any restoration on the island. And the coolest thing is that creates healthier worlds where people can live. So they have, they can fish, they can farm, and they don't have to worry about like rats eating their food. And this allows sort of a whole chain of ecosystem health that protects all sorts of people, even from extreme weather like tsunamis and like big waves and stuff. Because if there's a coral reef, protecting the island, then the coral reef is like really strong, then the wave won't be able to reach all the way to the land. And it stops the islands from getting eroded, and it stops them from, facing like total devastation from bad weather. So another thing that we have recently started doing is called social attraction. So it used to be like we would go in and we would, look for invasive species and get rid of them. But now we've decided like we have the science tells us that the time is now, it's really urgent, and we need to accelerate recovery by inviting these connector species back. So we do social attraction, which is like basically playing recordings of bird calls and like making these little dummy burrows so that the birds know that the island is safe to come back to, and then they go and nest in there, and then we can see what they're doing. So I have a couple of really cool animal stories that I wanted to highlight. The first one that we're like really, really proud of is the Peruvian diving petrel. This species was actually listed as endangered a couple of years ago. It was really, really threatened, like it was going to go extinct. But now that we have gone into these special islands that are like absolutely key nesting grounds for these species, they are able to have chicks again. So now they have officially been downlisted. They used to be endangered and now they're near threatened. And hopefully soon they will be, least concern with like really good breeding numbers. We're super excited about that. So that's usually happening in Latin America, in islands around like Chile and Peru. Another one we're really excited about is the cactus finch. So in the Galapagos Islands, those are islands that are like super, super famous for helping, people learn about how island species evolve in relative isolation compared to other species. And there's all these like really, really famous finches that live there that are all like really specific, and they only live on one tiny island, and they have beaks that can only eat one really specific type of food. So there's this bird called the cactus finch, and we thought that it had gone extinct. Like it hadn't been, nobody saw them in the Galapagos for decades. We thought that there weren't any more. But once we saved Pinzon and Rabida Islands from invasive mammals, after a couple of years, we started seeing them around again, and we noticed them coming back, which was really exciting. But not as exciting as this one, which blows my mind. I am obsessed with this gecko. This is the leaf-toed gecko. He's also from the Galapagos, and we thought he was extinct forever. Like we didn't even know that these were still alive in the world because we had only seen them in fossils that were like 5,000 years old. So we didn't even know that this was like a kind of gecko that was alive, and it's so, so small. And it seems like the scientists are saying, there was a really, really small population of these geckos that was hiding, and it wasn't safe for them to come out because there were invasive species everywhere. But now we're seeing them again. Um, Similarly, also in the Galapagos, we have the Floriana giant tortoise, which is extinct, because it was from this island Floriana, and the like in the 18th and 19th centuries, people came and hunted them, and they went extinct, and there weren't any alive anymore. But it seems like they have, the hunters took some of them and dropped them off on a different island, and then they ended up breeding with Galapagos giant tortoises, which are a different species. And so by tracking their DNA, we found out that there is this like one little colony of Galapagos giant tortoises, that have DNA from the Floriana giant tortoise. So by capturing them and creating a special breeding program just for them, we've been able to breed a tortoise that is extremely similar to the Floriana giant tortoise and will basically act the same way as it. And once we are finished restoring Floriana Island, which is happening right now, we will be able to re-release the new and improved Floriana giant tortoise, back into the environment. And they act as like ecosystem engineers because they're heavy, so they like stomp around, and can like make the plants, they control plants. They eat a lot of low-lying plants that no other animal eats. So those are exciting. There's also, just briefly, another part of the world. This is tufted puffin, from Rat Island in Alaska. So this was an island that has, there's no coral reefs, but there's a big kelp forest, and there just weren't any fish, and the whole island was just covered, totally, totally covered in rats. And there were no tufted puffins nesting there at all. There were a couple of other different kinds of puffins and some Humboldt penguins, but there weren't any tufted puffins. But once island conservation came in and we were able to remove the rats, we actually got the name of the island changed from Rat Island to Hawada Island, which is its like traditional name. And the tufted puffin started nesting there for the first time in like 40 years, which is really, really, really exciting. And their population is just improving and improving and improving. Really quick, I want to talk about plants. Pretty like, because we save animals, but in saving the animals, we also end up seeing plants growing because, everything is connected. So
Yeah.
this happened in Palmyra Atoll, which used to have a bunch of coconuts. And, you're like, okay, coconuts grow on islands, but they're actually really, really invasive. They're not naturally there, and they compete with these, special rainforests that grow on these islands. And this is a plant called Pisonia, and it's a really, really important native plant because there's a bunch of birds that only nest in this tree. Like, they don't want to nest in a coconut tree, they only want to nest in a Pisonia tree. So in Palmyra, um, same thing. We go in, we get rid of invasive mammals, and then we find that, like, over the years, these plants just suddenly are coming back and growing much, much faster. So we were measuring the biomass from 2011 to 2014. And this is my coworker Coral. Well, she's not in this picture because it's just like small plants on the ground. Here she is, and you can see them coming up to her waist. But like, if you can barely see her right there in that third picture in 2014, those trees are taller than her. That was a 5,000% increase in these plants, which just gives us more and more evidence that this kind of holistic conservation, like, it really works. It creates measurable impacts that are not, doom and gloom, and we can prevent and reverse extinctions. A couple of other really interesting things we do. So we invest in a lot of new interesting technologies. So we use like drones, remote sensing, AI, all those kinds of things to like restore islands faster, and go to places that we couldn't go otherwise. So, look at this island here in the back. So this is in Tonga. They have really, really mountainous islands, like islands where you can't really trek all over them yourself. It's too steep or it's too dangerous or whatever. And it used to be we could only get a helicopter. Like, that was used to be the only way that we could get to the top of these islands. But that's like really, really expensive. And it's also kind of dangerous. So using a drone
Yeah.
is much safer, much better, cheaper, faster. And, it allows us to go to places that we never could have gone before. We are also working on, we started out as, all we do is islands. Like, we go to the island and we are only interested in that. But, we've been around for 30 years. And over that time, we've found out that the sort of everything being connected has led us to understand that we really need to do a better job connecting the islands and the oceans. So we started, along with Rewild and Scripps Institute of Oceanography, the Island Ocean Connection Challenge, which tries to bring together different organizations like NGOs, governments, philanthropic organizations, or whatever, that want to come together, um, and share our knowledge about how to save islands and how to save the ocean. Because all of our expertise has to do with things that happen on the land. And if we, unite with other scientists that are really good at doing things in the ocean, then we can probably achieve even more and more exciting impacts. So that is the end of my presentation. I know it's like a lot of information, but we do a ton of stuff. And we have hundreds of islands all over the world that we work on, and tons of species that we save.
Yeah. I mean, well, I was actually in the Galapagos Islands about
Cool.
4 years ago, was it, Dad? About 4 years ago. And I actually fed tortoises there. I'm not sure if it's the same tortoise,
Wow.
but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the tortoises there, they're in they used to be in so much danger, and they still are because they require such specific habitats to live in, and they eat such specific food. But it's thanks to folks like you who really care about them and like want to interact with them, that there's so much support for protecting them and, making sure that they're well taken care of. So it's like the the species like tortoises that just look so cool and are so
Yeah.
fun to interact with and good to hang out with are really, really important to us.
And especially those giant ones that are like 100+ years old
Yeah,
that were
they can
like
live
my
so
height.
long. And
Yeah.
it's crazy because their babies are so, so small and their eggs
Mhm.
are so, 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 so fragile. Um, so we work with a lot of so the tortoises, they live mostly on land, and we also work with a lot of sea turtles that live in the land and on in the sea. And when they grow up, they're so strong, like nothing can bother them. But when they're babies, they're so vulnerable. There's poaching, there's, they can fail to get to the ocean where they need to go. There's predators. So making the world safe for them is like really, really important.
Yeah. So your team is all over the world. How many people is it?
We have a little less than 80 employees, which is surprising considering how much we do. It's a comparatively very, very small team. The thing that it lets us, do such a good job with so few people, is first of all, the people are awesome. They're just like really, we're really good at our job. We've got so much experience. We know how to do it. Like we have really, really good efficiency. And we don't have a lot of like people who aren't scientists. Like we're so focused on the mission and sending people out into the field and making sure that they're out there doing what they got to do. The second thing is we do a lot of partnerships. So we work with people who live on the islands. We work with other NGOs, other nonprofits, and like help them create the island ecosystem for their home that they want to see. So, for example, in the Marshall Islands, where I'm going this summer, um, there are they're very, very low lying atolls. They're not very mountainous.
Yeah.
So the people there are worried because they experience a lot of erosion, and like a lot of extreme weather. So they wanted to find a way to protect their islands from extreme weather. So they contacted us, and then we are able to go in and be like, okay, you need stronger plants because the plants have roots and the roots can like hold on to the island. You need stronger reefs, and then we can, connect with them to make sure that like they are implementing science in a way that benefits them. So it's not just like us going in and being like, all right, here we are cleaning stuff up and then we leave. It's a lot about like knowledge sharing, building communities, um, and partnerships, which is like our number
Yeah.
one key to success.
Hmm. Can you give us an example of a project that island conservation did that was either really challenging or just didn't work?
Yes, I can. Most of our projects are super challenging. I think the one that I would give you, that was maybe the most challenging was Wake Island, and Midway Atoll. So those are places like right in the middle of the Pacific, um, where there's like a lot of different environments on those islands, and we tried to remove invasive species. And because we came back and did a lot of monitoring, we found out that like some had escaped and there were still some living and hidden on the island. And so that meant that the project that we thought was going to be like a 3-year project is now a 10-year project. And we keep coming back, and we, are trying to improve our methods. So that's one that's like still going on. And then in Wallace and Futuna, those are two islands where like the budget was very small, but the islands were very big. And that was like one of the very, very first places that we ever used drones. So
Yeah.
learning how to do those, using it like the really difficult terrain. A lot of these islands have never been mapped before, like they're really, really remote. And
Mhm.
so figuring out how to fly the drone and where to fly the drone, um, they're very, very challenging. But luckily, we have a lot of really good partners. That can help. So right now we're partnering with NASA and they're giving us a lot of remote Earth sensing data that like and satellite imagery that'll help us, figure out exactly how much forest cover there is and where where it is and how to achieve our goals. But that's very new. It didn't like satellite imagery, especially in remote places, hasn't always been this reliable. So now, with better GIS, with better remote sensing, we're able to use hyperspectral data and new ways of sensing animals, even when they're like under the forest or like under the leaves and stuff. We can still fly a drone over and find out where they are, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, that sounds complicated.
It's really complicated.
Yeah. So, how do you guys get your funding?
Oh, from all sorts of different places. So mainly we from private funders, like from regular people who really, really care about animals and they want to stop extinctions and they donate to us. And then we also apply for grants. So we get funding from philanthropic organizations like the Packard Foundation. Um, and we also, since we're an international organization and we work for islands all over the world, we get to apply for government funding from multiple different governments. So we get stuff from like US Fish and Wildlife Service. The German government recently gave us an extremely generous grant. And we are able to leverage that money in partnership with local organizations that have their own capacities. So by sharing our resources and pooling together, we're able to achieve a decent number of our goals.
Okay. What do you think is the most important factor for helping islands in the future?
I think the most important is for people to understand the value of islands and really appreciate how much they bring to the planet. A lot of the time people are like, "Oh, they're so small." They're so small. Their ecosystems are really tiny. But considering how many endemic species they have, like species that are found nowhere else in the world, and considering their importance for oceans, um, they really, really deserve a lot of our attention. You can make like as a conservationist, you can make a bigger impact with one intervention on an island than you can make anywhere else. Because when you remove an invasive species from an island, as long as you do good biosecurity, they're not going to come back. And that island is like protected for generations to come. And then, everyone's always worried about the ocean because we're like in this ocean health crisis right now. And if we protect islands, then the amount of nutrients that can be moved into the ocean and protect fish and protect coral reefs is so great, and so much greater than I think people realize. So I think for me it's a lot about like convincing people that islands matter and that they really, really deserve our attention.
That was a really good answer. I mean,
Thanks. It's a good question.
I didn't understand anything about islands before this interview. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So what's the outlook for islands in the future?
Uh, it is murky, but I think, a growing a growing amount of success stories is making me more hopeful. So I'm an islander. My family is from Fiji, which is a really, really small island nation near New Zealand. And I, growing up, always thought like, Fiji's going to be underwater. I'm going to lose my culture. Like, I felt sad about it. But ever since I started working for island conservation, I started realizing that island restoration is like the best kept secret in conservation. Where I read a lot about all of these other organizations that are struggling, and it's just like such a challenge to achieve conservation goals in general. Um, but on islands, it seems like this organization in particular knows what it's doing. Like we our rate of success is so high. And it makes me feel really, really hopeful that if we can unite more and more island people, scientists, funders, NGOs, and other kinds of experts, that we really can like turn things around and save the coolest island species in the world.
Thank you so much for talking with me, Bren. And thank you for watching. You can help animals by hitting the like button and subscribing to this channel. I'll see you next time on Nature's Guardians.